Welcome back. Today we are going to take a quick look at KBEAR's KB01. So this is a one dynamic driver. They call it beryllium diaphragm driver, but it's probably almost 100% a beryllium coated driver or plated driver, as they like to say. But yeah, shells are actually quite nice. It's got a nice little pattern on it, and that pattern comes in, I think, red, blue, and gold. So pretty cool. I mean, they're nice looking shells. This one costs about $35 on Keephifi. So yeah, it looks about right for the price. You get the black stringy cable that you've seen before. I think there are other versions of it that are just a little nicer to touch. This one's kind of okay. It kind of resembles a more cheaper version of cables that you see from other sets, but not too bad. You also do get 3 sets of silicone tips in various forms. So you get that one, you get the white one, which you've probably seen before on other sets, and then the red one, which you've probably also seen on other sets. So that is what's going on. I think accessory wise and all that stuff, I think that's okay at $35. It's tips and a better cable would probably be okay, but we're going to go through this one quickly for this very reason. KB01 is very, very similar to your typical Harman bass boosted Harman-ish set from about last year, late last year. So had KB01 been released about a year ago, I think we would talk more about it, but now it sort of joins the pack of sets that, and I brought in Cadenza, C3, and Warner, and you know, it's very hard to split differences between the 3 of them other than the drivers, and there's some flavor differences between them. But, you know, generally, I think KB01 falls right there, mid-pack. Beryllium driver, beryllium coated driver, not quite enough to differentiate itself from the other sets in this pack. So we'll step through this one kind of quickly, and you can kind of see that the red one is KB01, and it's pretty much the same as Cadenza, same as Cadenza, and then it kind of differentiates here. So when it gets a little less accurate on the measurement, it tends to split off a little bit, but you know, very, very much the same exact tuning signature as you've probably heard or probably have in lots of other sets that you may already owned or picked up last year. So we'll actually start there and just say, you know, this is really KBEAR joining 2022, that Harman pack of sets, and it does a bass boosted Harman style set. Why do it? Because I've said this lots and lots of times, the tuning gets you kind of close to a very general, likable set, and KBEAR has really been missing that through most of 2023. And I haven't actually reviewed a lot of KBEAR sets for that simple reason. They actually sent Pecker, and I would review Pecker again just to say Pecker over and over again, because it's not often that I get to see Pecker, and I would really hope that they do a Pecker too. But, you know, for the most part, they're, you know, outside of Rosefinch, I think their tunings didn't quite hit mainstream, general likable. I think for KBEAR fans, they were something interesting to listen to and pick up, but as far as general likable sets, you know, I think this Harman style pretty much gets you right there, and they hit the right price point, about $35. So if you're asking yourself why they did it, that's about why they did it, because it's a likable set. Why they're doing it, you know, maybe a year later is probably a bigger question. And I do think this idea of tuning towards the Harman target, it does work. It just needs to be tweaked to the driver. And if you're going to point out the beryllium diaphragm driver, you should, you know, lean the tuning in a way that is a real showcase for this particular driver and really show off the strong points of your driver. Otherwise, it sounds a lot like Harman upper mids. And for those of you who have a couple of Harman sets, you know that this is sort of an emphasis part of Harman sets, and KB01 is really no different. You hear a lot of this, you hear some of this, not so much of this, but you know, a lot of these sets sound similar, and it's because they're all following the same tuning, and this part tends to stand out. And if you don't have a ton of mid bass here, this gets a little bit lean, and this kind of takes on a brighter sound to it. And that's pretty much exactly what KB01 does. So if you want to do this idea of taking a likable tuning and then tweaking it to where this driver does well or the high points of that driver, that's probably a better idea than just going straight at the same tuning that everything else did. So who should buy it? KBEAR fans, of course, people who like the look of it. I think it does look quite nice. It's quite attractive. Or if you wanted a similar tuning to those other sets I mentioned, but kind of a step-down treble level, or you like to turn it up. And I think this one's a little bit track dependent for the same reason. So I think this is dropped a little bit, despite what the graph says. The treble through the upper treble is a bit turned down on the KB01. This is sort of the bright point of it. So if you turn it up, you tend to hear this. You don't get a whole lot more of this. You don't get a whole lot more of this. You end up with a lot of that. So that's why I say it's a little bit track dependent if you want to turn it up. It's hard to get around that, but if your tracks don't have a lot of pin area in that 2 to 4K range, then yeah, you will get a nice little, you turn it up just a little more than some of the other sets for the same exact reason. So yep, better late than never, but it really should have been either cheaper, because at $35 it hits you right in the mid-pack of them, or more expensive with a better driver. And if you look at the history of KBEAR, they've done lots of more expensive sets with better drivers, and they sort of have a history of doing that. And this one just kind of landed mid-pack. It's not quite cheap enough to be the cheapest one, and the driver doesn't really stand out enough to really compete with the more expensive one. So, I think the set ended up being very good for KBEAR, but that's really not enough at the end of 2023 to really drive people to pick this one up after they've already owned, 2 or 3 other sets with a similar sound. So sound, similar to lots of other bass boosted Harman sets, and my hope was the driver was going to stand out. And I think, again, I kind of go back to this point of you can do Harman target style tuning, but you need to do something that showcases what this driver can do. And I think that's the part where they didn't quite get this one right. So the bass, I think the bass boost does work for pop music, and it really hits the mark for a $35 set with some extra sub bass. The upper mids are really strong on this one. That Harman target, when you hit it, it tends to be quite the emphasis, and the mid bass is still tucked. So it still comes off as a bit upper mid bright rather than balanced. And again, I think some of the other sets, when you listen to the balance between them, even though all these look sort of identical, I think Warner actually got the balance quite right, and probably a lot of it is just dipping this out a little bit so this isn't as bright. Some of the other ones, like C3, actually have a stronger upper treble, and it kind of brings back some clarity to the mids. I just kind of say that they should have tweaked something here that leaned into what the driver did well. So the mids, again, Harman style. This one is lighter in weight, as a lot of them are, and as all the weight they kind of pushed out into the sub bass. The lower mid is a bit thin, and the upper takes on that Harman style like we talked about. Generally, there's just a thinness to the sound, which can also sound detailed if that's what you're into, but generally it just kind of lacks the richness of having a fuller sounding tuning to it. And it seems slightly harder to drive or more sensitive to volume. Tended to need more than C3 or 1, or when you listen to them back to back, or you're just swapping cables from one set to another one. This one definitely needed a little more volume, and it's kind of interesting in that way. And if you turn it up, it actually does improve the mids quite a bit. But like I said, when you get into that Harman style and you've hit the Harman target in that pin area, it becomes harder to do that. And that's why I said I think Warner handled that in a better way, just by just cutting off a couple decibels off of the target. That gives you a little more room, a little more headroom to adjust volume and bring the mids, to really dial in the sound to where it sounds quite nice and natural, whereas the other one sort of peaked out right on the target, and that tends to be not as flexible when you're dealing with volume. So the treble, I think this one is a very, very safe version of the treble, maybe too relaxed. I think in general there is a lack of transparency or clarity to this one. There's something about it that sort of caught my attention, and it doesn't sound as resolving as the other two, as Warner and C3. And I think it has to do with the treble level and how it comes across, or the way the driver is sitting in the shell. Something is kind of slightly off. It just sits, the treble tends to sit a bit back. It's quite relaxed, and after the pinna, it sounds a little less resolving and resolute. And I think that's sort of the thing that I noticed most about this one is when you go back to back with C3 and 1, or an even bigger jump. But those two did a pretty good job, for their price points, at delivering something that sounds resolving and resolute and clear and a little bit transparent. It still hit the right price point, still did it in a dynamic driver. And this one, not quite there. I think they just needed to dial it in a little bit more. But if you are treble sensitive and you like it to be down a little bit, this one is going to hit that mark. And stage, it's kind of the same exact effect. It's just not quite enough height in the stage to beat the other ones that are similarly tuned and similarly priced sets. Again, this treble thing, without kind of upper treble to really make the stage sound a little bit bigger, it just kind of falls mid-pack, kind of mid-lower pack with the rest of them. So that's what I got on KB01. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.